Session. Yes.
Yeah, am I audible properly?
Yes, you are audible, Chet. Am I audible to you?
Yes, perfect. As long as we are audible to audience.
Yeah. So, good morning, audience. Everyone who's joining this live session, our weekly live session. Sorry, we are a little bit late today. We are starting at 11:30. Uh, Today we have with us Chet Jain. Chet Jain is founder at Crowdera as well as a Living My Promise signatory. Uh, but before I introduce Jane, let me talk a little bit about Living My Promise and our every Saturday sessions. As you all know, Living My Promise invites India's well-to-do to commit to giving half or more of their wealth to philanthropy, either during their lifetime or in their will, to a cause of their choice. Living My Promise is a self-driven initiative started by one of the promisers, Mr. Girish Batra, and now championed by 48 others as well. The initiative is essentially a community of promises and is not an NGO. This promise is a moral commitment one makes to their own self as well as to the public at large. Living My Promise is inspired by the example of millions of people of all income levels who give generously and often at a great personal sacrifice to make the world better. Living My Promise aims over time to help shift the social norms of philanthropy towards giving more, giving sooner, and giving smarter. We hope that through Living My Promise, we can create a community of like minded individuals who would like to do more and also inspire millions of others to re-benchmark their levels of giving. Those interested can check our website www.livingmypromise.org. Most of the times, we feel that philanthropy is something for for the for those in their 50s or like things like that. But Chet Jain is a young founder. Let me introduce Chet Jain a little bit. Chet Jain is the founder and CEO of Crowdera. It's a global fee-free funding platform for nonprofits and social innovators. With over 19 years of product management, corporate development, and sales experience, he has dabbled with many things professionally. He has an infectious passion for whatever he undertakes and is currently focused on a mission of digitally transforming 1 million charities by 2030. He has also experimented with writing and filmmaking. Chet was earlier based in Menlo Park, California, for over a decade and now currently shuttles between Singapore and India. Chet, welcome to the Living My Promise Saturday live session, Chet. Chet.
Thanks for the kind intro and hello everyone. Hello from Nagpur. So I'm right now in India and at my home in Nagpur. So hello from the geographical center of India. Am I audible properly?
Yes, you're audible properly.
Yes. So I'm all yours, Sushant. Go ahead, shoot your questions.
So, how's life during this lockdown period?
Honestly, it took a toll on a lot of people with their thought process initially, but as you have accepted, I always believe in real-time acceptance of the situation, and once you accept the reality, then it's always about how do you move forward from there. So all I see right now is more of an opportunity uh, for almost everyone to live in this new norm, the new normal that we have identified, and see how we can make the best out of it. I mean, we have been trying to get some time with our families, our friends, and I think this is all the time that we have got now. We don't have to travel. We don't have to get stuck in traffic. We don't have to be in the flights. We are right here. We can do whatever we want, and I think the world has proven that Zoom can run the world, right? Yeah. So all well, fantastic.
Yeah. So, Chet, one of the most interesting things about you is that, you know, you started your entrepreneurship journey at 19. We would like to understand what drove you to entrepreneurship at such an early age and as well as philanthropy.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So my background is pretty simple. Though I come from a nice lineage, but then I lost my father when I was like 5 months old, and my mom literally took care of the entire family, her siblings and me, and gave me the best education possible. So while I was growing up, there were two things that I used to see. Number one, how hard she is working to make sure that ends meet and give me the best education in the world possible. While doing that, she was also helping a lot of other underprivileged set of people, relatives, friends. with education. Education in the sense she used to buy books from her publication where she used to work and donate them. And it was very surprising for me. To be honest, I'm a Jaini, right? So business goes in the blood. So I used to ask, "Hey, why do you get it for low cost? Why don't you sell it? Why do you just give it away?" And she used to tell me that you'll not understand when I was a kid, right? And as I grew up, uh, my mind was honestly there was this giving of mom back of my head, but this how to create revenue streams, how to create sustenance in money, that was always going on back. So every time I'm trying to do something or help somebody, my approach would be how that can be converted into a business, and that's how I grew up. I went to engineering college. I was trying to become an electrical engineer. I did finally, but it's a long story. um, and when I was in my first year of engineering, I realized there was a lot of demand for services by the students. Like we were lazy students like us, we would not want to write our workshop journals. So there were some underprivileged kids who were great with their handwriting and their artistic skills. I found that gap and I got workshop journals made from some kids who were not even engineering, right? They were studying something else, and for them, if you give them 50 rupees for a journal for drawing and 50 rupees for writing, they would be excited. And then there were my friends and me who were willing to pay 200, 300 bucks for a journal because we don't have to do anything. That was practically my first business. I ended up shipping over 300 journals in my first year of engineering, and that was like, wow, I already had almost enough money to pay for my second year of engineering with that money. And that was an interesting thing. And honestly, I did not own a computer till then, even while I was in my engineering. And there was this fascination. We always used to go to different institutes and school labs here and there. So I was requested by somebody to source a computer for them. And again, the inquisitive mind, I did my research and again figured out a big gap in the market. The spares available and the cost of actual real computer being sold, branded computer, there was difference of substantial 20, 30, 40, sometimes 40% as well. I was like, wow, can I do something like that? So instead of helping this person buy the computer, I got it assembled for him and made the profit. And that was my first business, the real official business. Journey started, I was just 19. Um, from selling computers to branding them to becoming a legitimate company with getting sales tax numbers and all that. So that excitement, hiring a CA at this early age from Nagpur, right? I mean, not much of exposure at this point of time other than the traditional businesses. And slowly, to be honest, there was no giving in my mind. There was no empathy. There was no compassion. It was ruthless. I want to make money. Paisa banana hai, that's all. Uh, School was being missed out. I mean, college was being missed out. So I started a small uh, software development company. Hardware selling was already happening. Trying to go for Indian tenders, how it works in India. I mean, I did all that, whatever was required to be successful at that point of time. And in no time, I realized I was running a bunch of things. Some failed, a lot of them succeeded, and I was already having overall between all the companies I was running in just 6 years' time, I had 160 people working for me at different offices, different locations, and I was already thinking that I have made it, and without compassion, without empathy, without anything else. So that was the excitement of starting early. But then there was a beautiful end to that early entrepreneurship, teen entrepreneurship, I would call. The 6 years of 0 to 160 people journey took only 6 months to come from 160 to 0. And that was something different. And I've been through my peaks and valleys during that time, but this valley was big. And that time, you know, I practically lost almost everything that I had made. Made some good relationships, let go of people, firing in bunch. but at the same time taking care of their needs while letting them go. There was this moment when my mom comes to me and tells me, there is something that nobody can take away from you. I mean, good thing is you have got all the wisdom, all that stuff. Don't worry about it. So by the time I'm 24 and a half, or close to 25, it is 2004, mid July, just around my birthday. Uh, and my mom tells me something. To be honest, I love my mom very much, but then at that point of a time, I was just thinking that I'm a self-made man and blah blah blah, all that stuff. Uh, Too much. I used to think too much of myself. I was full of myself at that point. So my mom tells me one thing, that there is something that nobody can take away from you, and if you decide to have it, which means I don't have it yet. She says, you completed your 4 years of college. I went to college back to back. In fact, even I hired some of my lecturers. I even partnered with one of my professors. So done all that, but he said, why don't you finish your engineering? So I had not completed my engineering. I had close to 13 odd, 14 odd papers back in my third year and final year combined. It was a mountain for a lot of people. People used to bet that this guy would never become an engineer. And with that one statement of my mom, I realized the power of education, and then I realized why she used to do that. And then I took a sabbatical. That sabbatical is when my life changed. I literally let go of everything that I had, even the small business that was running. I was like, there is always a time when the computer software does not work, you do a hard boot. You have to do that hard reset. And that was my hard reset. I was like, let's do a hard reset. Of course, in the 6 years of journey, I had to do a lot of things, during the peaks and valleys, but this was a big hard reset. A hard reset that would allow me to set myself totally free from my own ego and everything else. Just like I don't have hair right now, I almost got a similar haircut. I was like, let go of everything that you have, including the hair is your pride, right? Now, the different reason I'm already losing them. So I was like, I just got a new hairstyle.
Hmm.
So I took a sabbatical for 6 months and I did a lot of reading around that. I studied a lot. Of course, I completed my engineering in one go, and that was a gift. I thought I'm giving it to my mom, but it was a gift to myself. I completed my engineering. But that was the time I started reading about a lot of philanthropists, lot of entrepreneurs, a lot. I mean, I just accepted that it is okay to take a step back. It is okay to pause. It is okay to breathe, and that set me on a different course altogether. So that was about my early stage, early entrepreneurship phase, Sushant. I mean, the story can go on long and long, but that was a little bit of a compassion, everything creeping into my mind, which would eventually evolve to a different stage. Yeah. If what do we? Hey, I'm not able to hear you. Are you on mute?
Yeah, I'm able to hear you. Chet, I'm able to hear you.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, Chet.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah. For viewers who are watching this session, if you have any questions for Chet Jain, please feel free to write in the comment section on the Living My Promise live streaming. Chet, I have another question for you. How has crowdfunding changed the landscape of fundraising for nonprofits in India?
Sorry. Hey, I lost you for a quick bit seconds.
Yeah.
Can you please repeat?
Yes, I'm repeating the question. My question to you is, how has crowdfunding changed the landscape of fundraising for nonprofits in India?
I mean, there is a big myth about crowdfunding, and I think there is a lot of thinking that crowdfunding is something new, and people think it is something very nascent stage and something like that. But what I feel is, especially in India and countries like India, Mexico, where we give a lot of value to communities, where we give a lot of value to network of your personal friends and relationships. I think crowdfunding has been happening for ages together. The only difference that has happened, I mean, I still remember when there was something wrong in the community, how people would come together, pull some money together, and give it to the needy person. Or when we have the Ganesh festival, everybody's collecting money and then making that event happen. So we all have experienced crowdfunding since our birth, in India. The only difference now it has taken is we're using tech to do that. And that's where we feel there is a lot of scope of improvement and that can keep happening. So I'll just stick to the question that you're saying. What I feel is people have embraced. India is not considered as one of the most giving countries, honestly. It was not so far. But lately, the effects of COVID, we have seen a lot of things are happening. Even now, when we have crowdfunding campaigns, a lot of funds are international funds. Fundraisers are spending their advertising money or outreach money to reach out to international donors. So my take is, yes, India has evolved, and India people have started giving. People understand giving, but it is still in a very small. It is still in small clusters. We still do not have the overall purpose of giving, and I think that's why I love living my promises thought process. If there could be a diluted version of that for almost everyone in the world who could commit a small thing. I mean, what I feel like, I met a rickshawala in Mumbai. So whenever I'm in Mumbai, I prefer to take a rick. And I saw this guy stopping by at every intersection, and wherever there was something, he would give some money to uh, the handicapped people. And his rule was very simple: if he sees a handicap, he's giving. He was like, I don't make too much money, but I really want to give. So if that thought process we can translate into the humongous population of India, I think giving can take to a different, I mean, India can go to a different level. So now coming back to the non-profits have slowly started accepting that it is okay to ask money. What they have been doing for so many years, for years together, is they were okay with the idea of asking in the closed doors. Mostly people just trying to reach out to. Mostly people trying to reach out to corporations, and that's the best way to run a non-profit. Now they have slowly opened up to a thought that it is okay to ask people and it is okay to accept that you are asking money. There is a lot of pride in Indian people, especially the non-profit founders. They they understand that coming on a platform and asking money is okay, but they assume that it would automatically happen. And I think kahavat to hai na, God helps them, those who help themselves, something of that sort, right? I think they have to still understand crowdfunding has transformed the landscape of fundraising in India for charities, especially post COVID. However, if you look at pre-COVID situation, majority of the platform, except for Givindia and Crowdera, our focus always primarily remained charities. But most of them, and I won't blame them because most of them were focused purely on medical emergencies. It had become a different business, and it is a model, it is required. But for charities, it was difficult for coming out of their shell and saying, "Hey, we need it." And now, but just by saying that doesn't help. They also have to come out and exercise the methods and processes that are required to use the best practices. They have to learn. They have to start investing in training themselves. So I would say there is a incremental change, but do I call it as a substantial change? I don't think so. I believe there is a lot to do. There is a lot to do. I personally feel the major initiative that one needs to really undertake is fundraising literacy. I think this is a call for everyone who's doing or supporting crowdfunding. If we run more of these educational programs and awareness programs for charities or anyone who wants to raise money for digital fundraising, this fundraising literacy programs could potentially transform the landscape of non-profit fundraising in India. They have to understand how the technology has to be used, and not just the technology. They have to understand their own power. They don't know their power. I mean, uh, think about an organization with access to few thousand volunteers, what that can do. You think about multiplying the fundraising nodes, right? The nodes of money collection. Now you're talking about one fundraising campaign page, crowdfunding page, and where we are all pushing the donors, or everyone is sharing that without practically, personalizing it. Now think about thousands of volunteers having their own personalized fundraising notes, and think about the power that it can have. And I think that would transform. I mean, I would be happy to talk about it more, but then, yeah, let's jump to the next. You're on mute, I believe, Sushant.
I'm not on mute.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you were speaking, but I couldn't hear you.
So, I mean, I'm very interested to understand, one of the things that you said, that you were this money-minded entrepreneur initially, and this transformation to being a philanthropist. Like, how did this happen?
I think philanthropist is a big word. I don't call myself as a philanthropist. I mean, there was some article that called me a philanthropist entrepreneur because we don't take money. People thought that because we don't charge commissions on a platform, or don't take commissions from the donors from either side, people called it philanthropist. I would say I'm just a person who has evolved a little bit earlier in life, who understood the purpose, before hitting my 50s, and I started moving on towards my purpose. So when I say that, earlier I was, as I said, money focused. Goal was, think about it like that. I grew up in a family where my mom was taking care of everyone, and she was working literally two jobs, taking tuitions, a lot of extra work, some additional support stuff. I mean, and despite being a double postgrad, she had to do so much. So there was always that desire in my mind that money should never be something that should bother me when I'm growing up. I wanted my mom to get off the job, and yeah, she did. She almost retired uh, in literally when she turned 40, I believe, 40, 41, something like that. And then that was my goal, so I had achieved that. But when my second phase of life started, so I wouldn't say I had evolved 100%, but I had empathy in me, I had compassion in me to do something. This time I also used to think about what, it's not just what is in it for me, but what is in it for the other person. So I became more of a win-win person. Before I was like just a selfish guy. I just wanted to do whatever I wanted to do, right? Whatever I needed. But the second level of evolution that happened was, what is in it for the others? How can I, let me give a small example. I don't, not to demean any organization, but I was approached by somebody from Amway, and they said that, hey, you are fantastic speaker. You talk very well. We would love for you to join. I got excited about the prospect, and I was about to get almost 100 odd people sign up in first week's time, become that some big guy or whatever it is in that. But then when I continued in that week's time, and I continued my journey of talking to all of them personally, and I realized, hey, I'm selling a false truth. Not necessarily everyone has it, what it takes for them to become that big network or something like that. I pulled out because I realized I might be putting a lot of people's hard-earned money into some black hole, which would never, return. I mean, it's fine. They could use the product, whatever it is. But I was like, no, that's not me. And that was the realization that I'm not that. Slowly, that middle phase, post my first set of entrepreneurship, I started working. I was like a semi-entrepreneur. I used to do real estate, selling to people having a lot of money, while on the side I was working for a services company. I got a great opportunity in Hyderabad. I have digitized literally missile designs to land records. You think about it, and I have done that. Working with the South Block to going to the extreme ends of Kakinada, and that's the kind of work I have done. But this gave me an opportunity to meet a lot of people, and when I was meeting these people, I saw the humility in all of them. I saw a business owner crying, not because he had no money, but he was he had his pride that he wants to make his company sustainable so that he can pay his employees, and he did not have money to pay for his employees. And I was like, wow, this guy is already a millionaire, has a lot of money. He doesn't have to worry about anything, but he was worried about his employees, and that kind of a humility and compassion. So my compassion started evolving as I grew up. It transformed when I went to the moved to the US. Uh, it was around 2009 10 time frame when I was volunteering for a Jain center. I was volunteering for writing, and I saw there was a major event happening for collecting money from uh, everyone who's coming to the temple for some temple funds for construction. It was one of the most beautiful Jain temples I have been to. Milpitas is where it's in South Bay, in San Francisco Bay Area, and I was a frequenter there. And I had audacity to just go out and shout out loud to one of my friends who was in the committee there, saying, "Hey, why the hell are you taking money from individuals for your temple construction? You can just turn around, and there are a lot of billionaires here who can just write a check of $250,000, $500,000, $1 million, whatever you want. And you have been doing it for years. You can. Why do you want to create a peer-to-peer network for temple construction? Do it for something better. Do it for helping somebody to get educated." And he was a good friend. He didn't mean to demean, but he said, "यार मेरे को ज्ञान देना बंद कर, ये बता तू क्या कर रहा है." That was his exact words. And I was like, wow, he is so right. I mean, while I'm giving all my wisdom, what am I doing? Except for sending some money back home and giving it for some kids for education, that was not sustainable. That would not solve the problem. That was the real trigger in my life to do something good, and that translated into helping small microfinance companies to charities to startups. I also help a lot of startups to you know create a great network. I started something called as Mope Startups, which was more of a pro bono initiative to help startups, meet the right co-founders, understand the processes of starting up, understand the immigration challenges, and we helped over 100 startups form in the initial few years. Slowly, the startup slowed down, but that day translated into my last company, which was called FundEdu. It was funding education. Again, it was a parallel activity while I was still working and managing stuff with eBays and the Cisco's and the Nessus of the world at that point of time. And that was again an evolution, because what I was doing was not much of a different thing. Something I saw, I just wanted to create something, created a tech company, hired a set of people, invested a little bit of money, raised a little bit of money. And we eventually came to a point where we were, again, something like a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo, taking 5%, 6% commissions from fundraisers. And during that process, I was interacting with a lot of charities, and I realized the real agony of the charities. Now let me talk how my life really shaped up. There were two revelations. Number one was you go to Austin, and Austin, Texas has, on one side you have Michael and Susan Lynn Foundation, like a flush foundation with a lot of money, right? Everyone writes them a big check. On the other side, there is the city which has highest number of non-profits per capita in the US. And most of these non-profits, these are like small non-profits. The executive directors or the founders of these non-profits are working two jobs. One, to take care of their family and their needs, and second, to take care of their charities. They were not getting enough donations. They did not know how to solicit donations. They also had pride, just like Indian charities have. And they hated platforms for crowdfunding just because there was a lot of money which is supposed to go to the real causes. That money is going for raising money, giving the commission. So they hated donor dipping. And that was a constant message across everywhere. Since we were only focused on education, we continued on that education route. But thankfully, after one acquisition in FundEdu, and then we immediately were able to, I had an opportunity to exit. So I took that opportunity because there was something I was not happy with, something that was wrong. I was like, there is something I can do better. And that's when Crowdera was born. I was talking to Chai. Chai Atreya is a very dear friend of mine, and he has been helping. He had helped me in the previous one, and uh, he just said, he suggested the name Crowdera, by the way, then, and we were discussing these problems. So he said, when you're so passionate about it, why do you worry about making money? I said, no, I don't. And that's how Crowdera was born. So Crowdera essentially started to help these charities to raise money absolutely free. I was like, whatever Indiegogo, Kickstarter, GoFundMe, everyone gives, right? Let me give everything, all of that absolutely free to everyone. And also help them handhold because they really do not know how to do these things. So it started like a very simple initiative
Yeah.
where a free fundraising platform would be offered.
Yeah.
And that was my promise. Irrespective of what happens, which direction it goes, I'll keep funding it. I'll keep making sure that this product survives and it will keep serving charities, handholding them how to raise money online. And it was not necessarily only to give the platform for helping them convert their ad hoc activity of fundraising into a process.
Yeah.
So that was one. The second major thing that we realized, and that revelation continued so far until the last research we did a couple months ago in the North American market as well. Very surprisingly, when we talk about India, even I believe 80% plus charities, I may not be wrong if 90%, if I say 90%, they don't have a website. They don't have a website that can collect donations. Simple donation button on a website. And that's surprising when we have 2.5 million registered charities in India and they don't have a website. I thought probably the Western world would be better off. When we did research in Canada, we realized surprisingly, the data shows that over 60% charities do not have a website that can collect donations. And there are a lot of such issues. So second revelation that we had is when people don't even have access to simple tools where they can collect money digitally, they they're not going to succeed because they're still going to stay into their local geography with
Yeah.
lack of funds to reach to different drive to a bigger city. So by the way, I was in Bangalore doing a non-profit workshop just before the day we had LMP session in Jan. Was it in Jan, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just a day before I met a bunch of nonprofits, and there were guys who were driving down from some small towns or villages. For them to make that effort to drive down was an expensive effort because they did not. That was too much of a cost that they don't drive down. And I was like, these are the common problems, and that's when my real mission started. I realized what is my mission. You see your calling, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was my calling to find out, and that was how do I get on a journey
Yeah.
to digitally transform charities,
Hmm.
provide them fundraising literacy. And in 2016, I was invited to be at United Nations. I was at the UN. That was my real exposure to the Sustainable Development Goals. And surprisingly, I also realized that SDGs are something that people don't know of. So all of that, cumulatively form my mission. My mission is to digitally transform 1 million charities by 2030 by the time
Hmm.
Sustainable Development Goals sunset and
Yeah.
help these organizations to go through fundraising literacy programs and SDG awareness programs. And that's where I think I have dedicated my journey.
Yeah. One of the interesting aspects that you spoke of, Chet, uh, let me also, before I ask you a question, I'll remind the audience. If you have any questions for Chetan, please post them in the comment section. But Chet, you could have been satisfied saying that, look, I'm the social entrepreneur. I'm already helping, charities raise funds by this digital transformation or anything. But why you felt compelled to commit 50% of your entire net worth for philanthropic causes?
I recollect Girish when Girish called me. It was, I think, very early. You guys had, very early stage. And when I heard him out, it felt like it's my okay. Let me just back it up before even that. I have a dear friend of mine in Singapore, Rajiv Srivastava. Um, he's an amazing guy. He's a philanthropist himself, and he's been giving something. So he told me a story about himself, and I shared my story. My journey was, I always believed that I got success in any endeavors that I was doing the moment I shifted focus from me to others. So, like my early journey of the first 6 years, when I was only focused on me, I saw the success, but it all went away. And the next phase of my life, when I was doing something, the moment my approach changed from me to others, I started getting all resources. I started believing in the universal principles. I read Deepak Chopra's book, Seven Spiritual Laws of Success, a million times. That's one of my go-tos. I've been reading it for several years now. And somehow there was this universal calling and the belief that I started firmly believing in, that it is not that you get something and then you give. You do something right first, and something right will happen to you, and not necessarily from. So I had this firm belief that this might sound philosophical, but this is my belief, that energy just flows in one direction, right? Even if it is whatever that energy is, it does not just go back and forth. If it's something is coming back and forth, it's something, it's a transaction, it's something different, it's a different set of energy. So when you are giving something, when you are doing something right, I mean, you're helping somebody, there is no expectation, there is just a right intention. And the moment you have that right intention, you just have a belief that you wanted to do that for the right reasons. You will notice you will have a lot of resources and support system coming in from behind, and you will not know where it is coming from. And not necessarily if somebody is helping you, you will be able to give back to them. You should be ready to accept as well. So this law of giving and law of acceptance somehow became boon of my existence, bane of my existence. Sorry. So I realized that if I do this in my business, will it help? Well, it helped. And that philosophy, I had not shaped it up how to do that. And when I met Rajiv, Rajiv shared a story about him when he was shaping up his next company, pitching to one of the last rather pitches to one of the investors. Uh, and what helped them raise was not how great of a business they were trying to build. It was what he was wanting to do with that. He committed 50% of his wealth at that point of a time, whatever he's going to make, for 50% of his personal equity in the charity cause. And he keeps doing that even still. And that was the moment he shaped it up. And I was like, I was already committed that anything that I'm going to make or I have, I want to commit it. And that's when I heard Girish talking about it. I was like, wow, this is something that should shape up and take a right form. So a part of me says, spiritually speaking, it is a selfish motive that I have I have a big mission to do. That is, I want to digitally transform 1 million charities, and I want to help, you know, technologically empowering underprivileged, whether it is charities or others. I want to help underprivileged women to get education. So there are personal causes. There is a personal cause that I have. Like I don't want to see a single person on crutches. I want to see everyone walking. So how do I get artificial limbs? So there's a lot of such life missions that I have. And I was like, whatever I make or whatever I would make in my lifetime and after I pass, I want that to take care of all the missions that I have. And Rajiv told me, can you make that mission loud enough, big enough, amplify it enough so that whatever your 50% that you're committing should be able to take care of that. Now, if you think about if my 50% is which I'm giving away is going to take care of that, and it is a humongous activity that is required, of course, the remaining 50% will have to also become big. So the remaining 50% that is going to take care of me and my family and whatever I'm going to do at a different level, right, will also be taken care of. So my purpose of that thing was very, Rajiv shaped it very well, and then Girish spoke to me, and I was like, it was just a perfect alignment, and I want to sign up. Honestly, I was like, I don't want to wait till I die. I was like, I'll keep doing it as I have kept doing this thing. I'll keep doing it while I'm alive, and I want to see maximum things that I can do uh, while I'm alive, and see how I can translate these things into others. So what I do now is, of course, I'm trying to translate into my family and friends and whoever I can talk to. I talk about LMP all the time. But I also, when I'm helping a particular startup to get connected with somebody, there is the pitch I make. I'm not pitching them to give 50%, but I just tell them, can you commit whatever that could be, whatever you feel like, 1%, 2%, 3%, whatever it is, today when you are nothing, when you are just shaping up, right? When it becomes big, it might become a different situation. But if you can commit this thing today and align it with your SDG, whatever sustainable development goal you want to align with, I think that's my way of that would be something that I would call it as a lineage when I pass, right? How many such lives I have touched and asked them to start doing good, and it is good for them. Their brand perception goes up. Plus, when they are giving it with the right intentions, universe is going to support them.
Yeah.
Overall, I think it is a win-win for. I think instead of triple bottom line, people should go for quadruple bottom line with a little bit of a spirituality angle to that. I hope that answers your question.
There is one question they're asking. I have raised fundraising many times, but not very successful. Can you please share some tips to raise funds for causes?
So, fundraising is a process. Can I know the name of the gentleman who asked the question?
Mr. Arvind Agarwal.
Hey, Arvind, hi. So, fundraising is a process. It is whether you are raising money for your company, or you want to set up a shop, or you are raising money for your charity or your personal need. It requires a full-time attention, and it is a dedicated, clustered attention that you need to give. There is a myth that going on crowdfunding platforms or having just a website is going to solve the problem. No, I think there is a process. Number one is, first you have to identify who is your audience, and that is a very important thing that people generally miss out on. You should know who would contribute to your cause, who would donate to your cause. So audience building is extremely important, and how you do that is, even you may have like just 10, 15, 20 odd donors or people who really support you. All you do is interview them. What do they like? What kind of news they read, what kind of radio they listen to, what kind of TV programs they watch, what kind of magazines do they read, what kind of newspapers do they read, what kind of online portals, what kind of messages do they read on WhatsApp. So you literally analyze them, try to get an insight from them, and see how you can find more people or come up with a message that is appealing to these people. So that's more of a physical effort that you want to do and do that. While you do that, when you're getting on Facebook, for example, if you are directly doing your Facebook marketing, then try to get your donor base, add their list, create a custom audience, and help. I request Facebook to create a lookalike audience so that Facebook's AI will help you to identify more of those audience. So I have still not gotten to what story you should talk about it. I'm only talking about audience building and how to creating your audience. That is the core key of your fundraising. And once you do that, that has become a process. Second stage is, even before going and asking money, find out how many of people are ready to vouch for you. How many of them are ready not just to give you money. Money is something that some people give and just wash their hands off, right? But there are some people who want to volunteer their time, some people who want to support you, some people who are in with all their heart and soul with you. See if these people could become your ambassadors, and if they can become your fundraisers also. And I know it's too much to ask for when you are asking people to fundraise for you, because there is a lot of process they have to go through and it's not easy thing. But there is a way out. Of course, Crowder is there, which allows people to do that. But then you identify these ambassadors. That's stage two. And then you come to testing out your messaging. Then you come up with your very heartfelt message. Don't worry about investing money on making big videos. It could be a heartfelt, simple message, just like this, which is happening on Zoom or phone or whatever it is. Take that message, a couple of these messages, share it with your initial set of people who are supporting you, ask their feedback. So it's kind of a private launch that you are trying to do, and asking people what do they feel about the messaging. Is the message connecting to their heart, right? And once you have garnered initial support, some data shows up, and that is when you reach out loud to the public. You set up an embargo of all the friends who are supporting you, volunteers who are supporting you, to share on their social media, WhatsApp, literally at the same time, creating that buzz around it. See how this, soft launch works, public launch works for you. And once you shape it up, figure it out, constantly communicate, send a thank you message to every donor who is supporting you. I mean, build that engagement. And that's the stage when you figure out if your custom audience or advertising or whatever you know. Of course, there are organizations that help you to do that. Digital advertising companies, to crowdfunding platforms like ours or anyone else's. But what our goal is to see how you can become that process expert, and you set up that process. So going forward, every year or every occasion, you don't have to worry about it. It's a process. You deploy somebody who do that, and it will work very well for you. It will definitely there will be tweaks around it. Not necessarily the first messaging that you share will connect. You'll have to keep experimenting with few messaging, few headlines, few campaigns. So that is one. Please understand, crowdfunding, people are using it primarily for a limited amount of time. Your approach with crowdfunding is not uh, to just gain money for that particular cause and forget about it. Your approach should be, how do I build my relationship with the donors who are supporting me on this crowdfunding initiative, right? Because this campaign goes away your relationship. You should work with the organizations to ensure you have access to the donor database. You can engage, you should be in a position to engage with those donors, share some updates, even if the campaign is over, right? And that's when you, next time when you start something, it it probably would take 48 hours to 76 hours or maybe a week to just raise your goods whatever you want. It's a process, my friend. I believe, Arvind, uh, try and see what has helped you and try to convert, and these processes could be different for each different individuals. At Crowdera, what we try and do is we try and understand everyone individuality, and sticking to their individuality, we help them to create their own process and see how it works for them. I hope that answers your question, Arvind. Sushant, over to you if you have anything additional on top of it.
Yatin is asking you, how do you differentiate Crowdera from other crowdfunding platforms?
Okay, honestly, I would not like to use this platform to promote Crowdera, but just to answer your question, guys, Crowdera has four initiatives that we operate on. One is a free crowdfunding initiative, which is on gocrowdera.com, which essentially is a free tool that we offered in 2014, uh, originally starting with the US North American market, and it is live in 150 plus countries now. So people from 150 plus countries raise money on Crowdera very seamlessly, easily, without giving a dime to us. It's absolutely free. And we don't even take tip from the donors. Unlike many other global platforms that claim to be free. So that's the free crowdfunding piece. Of course, there are some upgrades. People want support system. Wherever we have to put human efforts, they have to be compensated for. But the platform, essentially DIY, is absolutely free. The second initiative that we have on Crowdera as a company, as an organization, is digital transformation fundraising literacy and SDG awareness program that we have, wherein we are trying to digitally transform 1 million charities by 2030. And thankfully, we have got some wonderful partners. Some we have signed up with, some we are signing, because we don't have access to the rurals of India. And so it is a global initiative that we have. And I believe majority of these charities that we are going to do would be from India and Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Now, the other two initiatives that we have are essentially more of commercial activities that we do. And again, so comparison with the other platforms that I mentioned was essentially more of the crowdfunding piece that we were speaking, which is free, and we have a peer-to-peer network, which is very seamless. In matter of minutes, you can onboard thousands of fundraisers for yourself, literally thousands of fundraisers, which is very unique. Coming back to the commercial aspect, we run a SaaS platform, software as a service platform, which is specially focused on charities, universities, and now we are also including schools because they need a lot of support. Herein, what we try to do is we have built many software tools to support the overall charitable giving ecosystem, donor management ecosystem, wherein organizations get to a sustainability, optimizing their efforts, automating a lot of things into the fundraising. Because crowdfunding is more of a small window of opportunity where you go for a few days and do something, wherein we want to help organizations to have sustainability year round and forever. So we help them with an entire framework, which will help them set up to a level where they can have their supporters around the world raise money for them. So you can potentially have a volunteer in Germany start a fundraiser for you, and donations if you have FCRA, or if you have FCRA partner from internationally, but the donor funds will directly come to you. The volunteer or any fundraiser from anywhere in the world would never see that money. Uh, and we also offer our platform as a solution to different countries. If somebody wants to launch their own fundraising platform or something like that. So think about us. We are not here to compete with any other platform. And I really appreciate all the wonderful work everyone is doing. I think Give India has done a great job in helping charities and during the COVID causes. Keto and Milaf has done a great job in terms of helping, medical emergencies. Crowdera is doing its bit to support people, doing it pro bono. But our focus as an organization, as a company, is primarily more on a software as a service model that we work on. I hope that kind of clarifies a lot about us. And yes, we operate as a company from India, Singapore, and US.
Chet, before I leave you with one last question,
Yeah.
uh, what do you think we can do to promote a culture of giving in our country at all levels?
Like I was mentioning, right? The gentleman I met, the rickshawala, the rig guy in Bombay, in Bandra, he was stopping at almost every intersection and requesting me, sir, if you don't mind, can I? So he would just, at a signal, he would go and give away money. That was one just stories like that. If we can map the giving stories of small, people, and make them understand two things, that they don't have to think about making money first and then giving. You might be making just 15,000 rupees a month, right? But the 50, 100 rupees, if you want to give away, or some effort that you want to give away, is not going to make you poor. Rather, it is going to create that trigger of abundance for you, and you will see things happening. So, if we can create a lot of education for this, is what is going to make a lot of impact. And when I say education, taking such stories, putting out the videos, and I think we want to launch one initiative that we have in mind, which we are working on. We want to call it as a givers appreciation platform. So this platform essentially would invite stories from everywhere. Anyone can contribute. These stories would be put on a small platform. Again, it could be a platform where there would be no advertisement, no monetization. It's purely to share stories of givers. And let us see how we can spread the awareness about these givers. These givers could be a donor who has been giving on crowdfunding for every month. For example, I know a great giver in Singapore, a very dear friend of mine, Pramod Jain. He keeps every small opportunity. He does not think if the money is going in the right direction or not. He just wants to give. And I have seen him going through a lot of stuff, but he always comes out, and I think he has this power of universe supporting him. I have really seen many people doing that. So if we appreciate them, this will create a wave of doing something right, because people follow the trend. So we better use some of these techniques to influence more giving. Um, in people. And I'm not just saying India, I think it is throughout that we need to do. America by far has been giving far more giving, America, New Zealand, and when I say America, it's overall North America, Canada, and US as well. Far more giving countries, and I'm very glad to see how India is shaping up now. India is more helping than other countries. I think India, China comes in top when it comes to helping others. So there is a lot that can be done. So that's my 2 cents on that, Sushant.
Thanks. Thank you so much for taking time and attending this Saturday live session with us, Chip. We're grateful for you. And for the viewers you're watching, we'll have another speaker next Saturday at 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Please do join us. Once again, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
fantastic what you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me, Sushant. And I think it is, I would like to say a few words about Living My Promise. Maybe I can just take this clip and start promoting this. Guys, you really need guidance when you want to give something and you want to be in the right company with people like Venkat, people like Ahmed, people like wonderful people who are part of Living My Promise. You would be in great company if you really feel there is something that you want to pledge, not necessarily while you are living but after you're gone. This is the best platform to do that in India by far. It is not just a platform where you sign up online, but it is a platform that gives you all the tools to understand what it takes to give. I believe it's worth a try talking to Sushant and his team. And so that would be an appeal I would like to make all my friends and everyone who is watching this and who thinks they are at a position where they would have substantial giving, substantial for themselves, even if they give 50% of the wealth. Of course, you are free to give whatever you want, but then LMP is especially for people who want to give the 50%. So that's my appeal to everyone. Look up Living My Promise. Talk to Sushant, and hopefully we'll have a lot more promisers with Living My Promise soon.
Sure.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. As Chet has mentioned, if you require any more information, please check our website www.livingmypromise.org. Thank you. Have a nice
And of course, don't forget Crowdera if you want to raise money or set up your fundraising frame. Bye bye.
Bye.